And we're very, very lucky to be joined today by Peter King. And Peter, I was telling you before we started rolling that we've talked to so many folks over the past 24 hours to just share their memories, their stories, their John Madden moments, for lack of a better term. But I wanted to ask you, how will you remember John? Because we've heard so much about people remember him as a coach, they remember him as a broadcaster, they remember him as the guy on the front of the video game. How will you remember him?
I think listen, I've thought a lot about this in the last few hours, and I believe there is no one in the history of football who's been more influential than John Madden. And I realize that is an evocative statement. And people say, wait a minute, what about George Hallis? What about Pete Rozelle? What about Paul Brown and Belichick and Brady and all that? But here's the way I look at it. John Madden retired at age 42. Now, how many people who are coaches in the NFL have retired in their early 40s and done enough in that period of time to be elected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame? There's only a list of one. He's the only guy to ever have done it. So there's John Madden, the coach, the Hall of Fame coach. How many people can say when they retire from their first love that they will have two other careers that they will be world class at? Now, it's entirely possible that he was a better broadcaster than anyone who has ever lived who did his job, a color analyst on sports events. To me, I think he's the greatest there ever was in any sport. So there's that. Whatever you think of that, whether you think he's the greatest color guy of all time, whatever, or he's certainly in the discussion for that. Okay. And then let's talk about the millions of kids, millions. I mean, Micah Parsons of the Dallas Cowboys said today that he basically learned football from playing the Madden game. And so those are the kinds of things. That game has grossed $7 billion with a B, dollars. And so just think of, a great football coach, a video game entrepreneur. Even though he didn't make it, he was very influential in how it was presented and how the game was played. And he wanted it realistic and in how people understand football. And then clearly, I mean, he explained football. And the best example I can give you is that, my wife said to me, my wife is a very, very marginal football fan and a less marginal sports fan. And she basically said to me, she said, he really made me love football. And those are the kind of things that add all those things up. What has he done? Here, I'm using my hands just like Madden, but I just think his influence cannot be underestimated.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a great point, Peter, where my wife is very much the same way, a very marginal football fan. She roots for us, but I come home and she goes, "Hey, did you win today?" "Oh, okay. Well, guess what's on HBO tonight?" But, it's funny because looking back to yesterday, she reaches out. My father-in-law reaches out. My buddies reach out, right? And everyone has a story. And he was, it just shows the type of
Yeah.
multi-generational impact that this man had on all of us.
I'll tell you the other thing. You asked me, hey, so what do you think about Madden? And I, in 1990, I was a young pup at Sports Illustrated, and I convinced a very dubious John Madden and his agent Sandy Montag to let me take a bus trip across the country from Pleasanton, California in the East Bay to the Dakota, the apartment complex in New York where he lived, where, by the way, he would sit in the courtyard some days and just have long conversations with Yoko Ono. And so, but on that trip, the one thing there's a lot of things that stick out, but the one thing I've been thinking about a lot since I heard the news of his death is we're driving on a beautiful late October, like a lovely, lovely day, maybe 68 degrees, bright sun, maybe 3:00 in the afternoon. And it's just the kind of day that you're driving through Nebraska and you look around and you say, man, America is utterly beautiful. You think, what's in Nebraska? But over on the right side of the bus, there was a huge meadow, a huge field of bright red wildflowers. And Madden said to the bus driver, Willie Yarborough, he said, Willie, pull over. And Madden goes to a drawer in the front of his bus and he picks out a book, and it's called Wildflowers Across America. Mm. And he picks out this book and he gets off the bus and he walks up there and he's flipping through the pages. Maybe takes 10 minutes, but he finds the flowers that he's looking at right there. And for that moment in time, he considered that a great moment. That now when he drove through Nebraska and somebody said, wow, look at those flowers. He'd say, yeah, those are nasturtiums, or I don't remember what they were. But hey, that's what those are. And so, like, I just believe, there's a cliche in life, make sure you stop and smell the flowers. John Madden in his life stopped and smelled the flowers.
Peter, it's an incredible story. And it just feels like there was just such an appreciation for not only the little things from John, but an appreciation of life in general. And like I said, we've been so fortunate to talk to so many people that were around him, that knew him, that loved him over the past day. But it just felt like he was a guy who just enjoyed life, enjoyed the act of living, of being a friend, of being a brother, of being a husband, all that. Like, it just seemed like he was someone who squeezed every ounce possible out of this one life that he was given.
Yeah, and, look, I think he took great joy in the fact that in later life, certainly not in coaching, but in later life, his sons were really heavily involved with him, and his sons were always around. And I think he really enjoyed that, because you saw in the Fox documentary that, for people who watch that, what is really interesting about that is, consider that, let's say for the sake of argument, you are close to your family, and every day you come home at 5:30 or whatever, and you and your wife and your kids have dinner together at the table. Well, that's not the case with football coaches. They don't do it. And I think really one of the things that thrilled him and really pleased him when he got out of coaching at age 42 was that he could be around for his kids as they grew up. He could go to all their football games. He could go to all their school events. And did he miss the action? Did he miss the thrill of the sidelines? I'm sure he did. I never asked him about it, but I'm sure he did miss that. But he was also, Aaron Rodgers said something to me in training camp this year. And he said, you're not going to hear me talk about what might happen in the future. I am going to be where my feet are. I'm going to live this year. Whatever happens in the future, I don't know what's going to happen in the future. But I am going to live for the moment this year. I've told my teammates to do that. And to me, one of the things I really admire about John Madden is that he never, when he was 45, 47, 52 years old, said, oh my God, I made a terrible mistake. I want to coach again. I want to get back into coaching. No, he just enjoyed everything that he did. Whatever he was doing at that time, he really liked it. And I think there's a lesson in that for all of us. Don't always be looking for your next job. Don't always be thinking about next week or tomorrow or whatever. Do the best that you can do today. And that's, I think, how John Madden lived his life.
Yeah, and I think that there's something powerful in taking ownership of your decisions, right? Decisions that maybe weren't popular at the time. That people are scratching their head like, "Oh, you have the best gig in the world. What could you possibly be doing?"
Yeah,
but to own it and to be yourself and to be 100% authentic to who you are and what you want to be. But Peter, I wanted to ask you, and going back to John as a coach, and like I said, in talking to folks over the past day, I think one thing that everyone has brought up, they said he was the perfect fit for those Raiders teams. Coach and players really melded together. They became one. And obviously, you look at the wins and losses and what they were able to do on the field, it speaks for itself. But it really did feel like John and the Silver and Black were a match made in heaven.
He was the perfect coach of the Raiders. He loved the Raiders. He just absolutely loved the Raiders. He loved that old stadium. I mean, it wasn't old when he was coaching it, but he loved that stadium. He loved the fans, He loved the game. He loved the players. He loved his players loving football. And, I've read a bunch of stuff about him when he was a coach that he didn't have many rules, but, you better play your ass off on Sunday. And if you didn't, he'd go find somebody else. So would Al. That was their thing. But I just think there are so many good lessons in what he did in Oakland, because just remember, there's never been a coach who's had a career of like 10 years and or longer and averaged 3 losses a year. He just had he had an incredible record, and a lot of people might say, well, of course he's got Al getting him the players, which was helpful. But it's like Pat Riley always used to say when he was coaching the Showtime Lakers. He said, you don't just roll the ball out in basketball. You don't. You have to teach players. And when they get to a certain level, you have to do this to get them to a higher level. You have to coach them to get better. And I think that was one of the gifts that John Madden had. He didn't just take that Art Shell and Gene Upshaw were great tackle guard set, combination on the line. If they were really good one year, he wanted them to be better the next year. And I think, again, there are so many parables between John Madden, the coach, and what we should all do in life. And that is, don't rest on your laurels, fight until the end. There's so much that he did in his life that has a lesson in it for all of us.
Yeah, may we all be lucky to live a life as full and filled with passion and
Yeah.
doing the things that make us happy, as John Madden did. Well, Peter, I have to say this was a genuine pleasure on a tough day for really everyone in this building, but really the football world is large. So we thank you so much for carving out a few minutes for us, and hopefully we see you sooner here in Vegas. Okay.
Sounds great, Eddie. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.